And on that note, I will pass over to Richard to get the meeting started. Thank you very much, everybody.
Libby, brilliant. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Really nice to have another reasonable turnout in the holiday season. So thank you for joining us, and for those who've attended all 9 of our events, well done for hanging in there. But no, seriously, it's our pleasure, and it's really important to continue to create an environment for us all to remain connected. It continues to be a volatile environment that we're working in terms of the pandemic, the economic situation, and ensuring that we are maintaining our connectivity, creating the environment for us to collaborate, share our priorities, and understand how we as Business West and the Chamber can support business is really important. And we'll hear a little bit more about that through Claire Rolfe in a couple of moments. I think it's today's session really is looking very broadly at the various different drivers around the economy. We're going to hear from 2 guest speakers in Zoe and Elena, who I'll introduce a little bit later, as to actually their views in terms of both what's happening in the UK and more generally the implications for our region. We know we've heard from Mayor Bowles about the work that the West of England Task Force are implementing, and we've heard from Bristol City Council and others in terms of the One City Plan, the Economy Board. So there's a lot of activity going on in the region, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as the morning unfolds. And I think it's also really important to just understand where we sit around the coronavirus and the pandemic. Both James and I meet weekly with other leaders from across the city with our public health experts, and we've heard from Christina Gray, the Public Health Director, on a number of our previous sessions to really help to understand the issues that are evolving around where we sit from the pandemic. We have had a couple of recent spikes. You'll be familiar with what's happened down possibly at Avonmouth with the Balfour Beatty facilities. And we would like to say that Balfour Beatty have been exemplary in the way in which they've engaged in dealing with the recent rise of cases at their facility. And they've done a superb job in being able to understand through track and trace what it means for their people. And that's a really good example, but a really good and open and transparent example of where there's been an issue and they've brought the experts in. And that's, I think, something for us all to understand, that if we see outbreaks, the earlier we can get across those, the better. At the moment, the data from yesterday's meeting is that we've got, I think, in the order of about 4 cases per 100,000. You'll remember when Leicester went into lockdown, there was about 130 cases per 100,000. And in the Northwest, where there have been local lockdowns implemented recently, they're in the 60s, 70s per 100,000. So even though you might see in the press that we are seeing some increases, those are seeming to be little spikes, either around 1 or 2 care homes, obviously the incident at the docks. So I think in more general terms, we're in a reasonably stable place. And I would like to just commend all of the different stakeholders in the public health environment for being really open and transparent. We are probably as well connected as we possibly could be around the data. So I think in terms of the underlying ability for our economy to perform within the constraints of the current rules and regulations, I think we're in as good a place as we can be. So I'm going to, without further ado, hand over now to Claire Rolfe, our Project and Policy Manager. And Claire has started to collate some of the work that and the feedback that has come out of the recent survey. And for those of you who've participated, can I say a big thank you? It really does help to inform our work. So Claire, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, I was going to take you through the results of the survey. So the survey only closed on Tuesday, and we're writing up the results for the whole pan-region area, but I've got some Bristol specific stats for you today. This is all, it needs to be verified, and there's a process in place to check my percentages are calculated correctly. But broadly, so Bristol was we had the highest response in Bristol than any other single region across the whole of the South West. We had 144 responses. which was really good. And there were some, I'm going to talk about some financials and then some sort of human capital trends that we've seen. Bristol is roughly in line with the Pan region. So there's no specific areas that really stand out for Bristol. So the mood is still quite negative, but less negative than it was before. So about 40% of Bristol-based businesses, and I mentioned businesses, but there are some non-profit charity type organisations in there as well. But 40% of respondents, almost all of them are businesses though in Bristol, have current concerns about their financial position, and that rises to 75% in the future. That is down from about 66 and 88% 3 months ago when we last did the survey. The proportions having an extremely negative impact of COVID on their business is 35, and a further 40% have had a negative COVID experience. About 8% have said that they've had a positive impact on their business from COVID, which is interesting. Profits are down by about 60%, well, for 60% of businesses. Cash reserves are down for about 50% of businesses, and liabilities and costs of finance are obviously going up by about 15% each. Businesses, in the most part, are quite small. Bristol ones are slightly bigger than our pan-regional trend, but just bear in mind that a third of businesses in Bristol employ 1 to 4 staff, and the proportions employing more than 50 staff are only 15%. So we have got quite a SME, like a small and micro business base responding to the survey. And businesses have clearly responded to the pandemic by deferring recruitment by about 60%. For about 60% of people have done that. Staff training is massively down by about 45%, and 35% of people are not have deferred exploring domestic markets or UK markets for their goods and services. In terms of redundancies and human capital, there are some interesting trends that I'll just quickly go through. So some of our respondents obviously don't employ any staff at all, so just bear that in mind. But of those who responded to our survey, 24% are planning or have already made redundancies, and nearly that many again don't know what their plans are actually because of the uncertainty. The big trend though is of the businesses who are making redundancies, almost all of those will have taken place by the end of October. So 56% of those redundancies have already happened, and a further 38% of those are due between August and October. Sorry, our survey obviously was at the end of July in terms of timing. One of the key headlines, which is like a negative, is the job retention bonus that was announced by the Chancellor in the summer economic statement. Our survey results show that nearly 70% of businesses reported that that will have no impact on whether they retain or make redundant their staff. Most of those say that it has no impact because they were always going to rehire those staff. And in fact, most of the people who have already been furloughed have already been brought back, at least on a part-time basis under the flexible furlough rules. And the job retention scheme was by far and away the most important, most valued scheme of support in our region. I think I'm going to stop because that's a lot of percentages, yeah, there are some interesting trends, and we will be writing up the full results and launching those in terms of media, and the report will be available for respondents and through our networks from the back end of next week.
Brilliant. Claire, thank you ever so much. And I know that that's hot off the press as the survey only closed at the start of the week. So thanks for disseminating those. And clearly there's some important issues for us to feed back into the various different task force and groups that we're involved with. So we'll be able to do that, and we'll share that, of course, with our members so that people can absorb that, and then that will help us to inform our work activities. So thank you very much. I'm going to now introduce Zoe Billingham. Zoe is the Head of Policy and Engagement for the Centre for Progressive Policy. Zoe, thank you very much for joining us just before your leave starts. So I'm going to hand over to you, if that's okay. Zoe, thank you.
Of course. Thanks very much, and thanks very much for having me today. By means of a very headline introduction, CPP, the Centre for Progressive Policy, is a non-partisan think tank, and we work with local authorities and combined authorities across the UK on delivering the inclusive growth agenda. We also at a national level speak to government about challenges that local areas and businesses are facing, and so we have a bit of a kind of in-between role too. And personally, I'm former government but also former business, so I'm always forever interested in this link between how government and business can best support each other in achieving their objectives. And just by means of my link to Business West, so I'm an observer to the Economy Board, the Bristol Economy Board, of which is chaired by James Dury from Business West. So that's how I got involved with this organisation and James. So just over the next few minutes, I just wanted to pick up on the work that the Bristol Economy Board has been doing as we look ahead to an inclusive recovery, and then just kind of give you a few insights from sort of wider pieces of work that CPP does, with a few sort of ideas of call for action that it'd be great to sort of discuss with you perhaps in the Q&A towards the end. So firstly, just on the Bristol Economy Board, so this is part of the One City structures under the heading of Marvin Rees and James Dury, as I say, from Business West is the chair. They, in case you haven't seen, have already put together a plan for a statement of intent for an inclusive recovery. And what that really means is just making sure that Bristol is aware of the groups, people and places in Bristol that could get left behind when we look towards a inclusive recovery. The recovery plan covers a few things that were of interest to the business community. So there's a big focus on good work, addressing low wages and working conditions. Another massive focus on skilling up of people who are in jobs that are in transition, and particularly as well of the younger generation, as they refer to, the lost generation of people who are just about to graduate from apprenticeships, college or university, and don't necessarily know where they are going next. There's also a big focus on leveraging investment from internationally, especially in the tourism, education and education sectors. So I think that's something that business has a massive role to play in. And then just picking up on what Claire was saying about the very high proportion of SMEs, the support that should be given to SMEs in order to build back better, in order just to kind of make sure basically that inclusive recovery includes the SME community, and it isn't just some sort of big corporate initiative that only applies to the region's biggest employers. So those are sort of 4 areas that the recovery plan will focus on, and through the Economy Board and James's work, we are contributing to that sort of final version of it for publication in late September. So encourage you to feed any views you have about what Bristol could be doing for you into James, into the Economy Board. A bit more broadly, as I say, as CPP, we work with a lot of places across the UK, and the government's new focus on levelling up and reducing the variation and the inequalities between different regions of the UK, I think is a real opportunity for the South West, both for getting in, putting the case for further public investment. When you look at the kind of regional variations between the UK, you know, we see a lot of differences, and I think this is a really good moment to be putting the case for that. And there's a few key deadlines coming up on the national scale. So there's the government's doing a comprehensive spending review later this year, and they're looking for submissions by late September with a levelling up focus. So perhaps it's probably something I'll pick up with Business West afterwards, but it'd be great to make sure that, you know, your views are represented as part of that process and putting the case for the Western Gateway and the Southwest in that. And then just kind of speaking in very, you know, matter of fact terms, obviously we're all aware that, you know, the claimant count is now pushing on 3 million. You know, Claire was just saying how, you know, the number of businesses in Weka and Bristol that have already made redundancies and still might plan. So we know that these are really tough times, and, you know, a real moment of transition as a lot of businesses just strive to survive. But as we look ahead, I think, you know, there is this big wider political momentum. Mayors across the UK are calling for this kind of build back better. So I just wanted to pick up on one or two ideas for what that might mean for business and how you can contribute to that agenda. So I think firstly, there's, as I say, a big emphasis on skills. So whether that means looking at the skills of your current workforce, looking at what sort of work your businesses might be transitioning to and how you can help them kind of bridge that skill gap, is a kind of critical way to helping people progress in work, as well as hopefully building your workforce for the future. And I think secondly, on the skills point, just making sure that you are communicating to local government about the skills you will need in the future, because that information is so critical to feeding your pipeline of talent that are coming out of FE colleges and universities to help feed your businesses in the future. And that's a kind of feedback loop that I know, you know, there's the LEP structures and obviously the leadership of Marvin, but that's the better you can get that, the tighter you can get that in your region, obviously the better the interaction between the skills you'll have for the employees of the future for your businesses. I think also just thinking about the community volunteering and spirit that has really built up even more so during this really difficult period, and whether in the future, I recognise this might not be something for immediately, how you can support your employees to maintain that sense of community and mutual support in your area. Then just picking up on the green agenda, obviously there's been a big push during this period to shift to more sustainable modes of transport, walking, cycling, and if there are any kind of schemes you can support your colleagues to use to pick up more sustainable modes of transport to work, for instance, I think that's a real concrete thing you can do, as well as accessing any funds to retrofit your office space to help meet net zero targets. And then I think just thirdly and lastly, I just wanted to say that, you know, as a result of the kind of huge, you know, furlough grants and loan schemes that have been put in place by government, I think there is an increasing sort of public level of scrutiny on business and what businesses is offering in return. So, you know, we've seen some very high profile businesses give back furlough pay because actually they've been making a profit, or, you know, the Richard Bransons of this world being told that actually, you know, the public don't see exactly the case for supporting that business during this period, even if there is indeed a case. So I just think transparency and communication from your business is a critical moment, and there's some real, you know, wins in terms of your place in Bristol and the wider region if you can communicate that effectively and how you're helping the area to build back better. So I will leave it at that. I'm very happy to pick up on any of those examples or wider work in the discussion later.
So thank you, that was really helpful, excellent, thank you. And you've picked up a number of themes at the end, and I'm sure there'll be some further questions and discussion and dialogue around those areas, so thank you for that. It's with real pleasure that I'd now like to introduce Elena Magrini. Elena works with the Centre for Cities, another organisation who we work with on regular occasions. So Elena, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, and over to you, thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks for having us today. As a mean of a very short introduction, Centre for Cities is an urban economic think tank. We look at the economic performance of the 63 largest cities and towns in the UK, and we try to improve their economic performance by providing economic and policy analysis. So what I'd like to do with you today, this morning, is trying to look at both the national picture and how it plays out in the Southwest, Southwest in terms of the economic impact that COVID has had so far and what this means for businesses in the coming months. So if we can go to the next slide, the thing I would like to start with is the claim and count figures that Zoe was just mentioning. We know that overall, at the national level, there have been 2.6 million claims for unemployment-related benefits. That's either universal credit or job seekers allowance. But we also know that these claims are not evenly spread out across the country. As we can see on the map, some places have a much larger share of people claiming unemployment benefits than others. Places that have got the highest shares tend to be in the north of England, places like Blackpool or Hull. And if we think about the Southwest region and the main cities and towns in the area, what we see is that actually overall, these places have been more resilient against the early short-term impact of economic of COVID-19 on the economy. If we look at the table, we see that places like Exeter and Bristol are among our 63 largest cities and towns least affected by the rising claim and count. And all the other large cities and towns in the Southwest tend to be performing better than the average. So they're towards the bottom of the ranking in terms of claim and counts, which is a good thing. Then, however, as we move towards the next slide, we know that the job retention scheme has done quite a good job in protecting jobs during the pandemic. So there's a question mark as to whether things are as they are thanks to the job retention scheme. What could happen once the job retention scheme gets phased out. Again, we know that overall at the national level, in between March and June, there have been 9.4 million claims from businesses for workers to be put on the furlough scheme for at least 3 weeks since March. But again, the take-up varies a lot across the country. Crawley is the place at the moment that has benefited the most so far from the scheme, and that could be related to the large presence of the aviation industry in the area. Again, if we look at the largest cities and towns in the Southwest, what we see that this time there is great variation. So on one end, we have places like Bournemouth that are actually in the top 10 of places where the take-up of the job retention scheme has been largest so far. On the other end, again, Exeter and Bristol have been less reliant on these schemes. So wide variation within the region. And we also know, while we focus on cities and towns, what we also know is that non-urban areas actually have seen higher take-up of the scheme than urban areas itself. So it's likely that many parts of the Southwest actually have seen higher increases in the take-up of the scheme. And now the question about how this is going to play out would really depend on the kind of industries that have put people on the job retention scheme. And if we move to the next slide, what we see is some research we've done earlier this year, looking at the expected probability of different industries to be affected by the economic impact of coronavirus, and hence put people on the furlough scheme or make them redundant. And what we know is that overall, 1 in 3 jobs in urban Britain are at risk from the economic impact of coronavirus, and these jobs tend to be in industries such as non-essential retail, transport, and especially hospitality, aviation, and leisure. And we know that places where these jobs make up a larger share of the overall jobs in the economy are likely to suffer more in the longer term. And with the phase out of the job retention scheme, this might be the places where we see more of the job retention schemes application turning into claim and counts rather than being brought back. And if we look at the Southwest, what we see is that the places most at risk are Plymouth and Swindon, while instead there are fewer jobs in these industries in Bristol and Gloucester, for example. So what does all this mean going forward? As I show in the next slide, what we can see is that there are 3 things that we need to keep in mind for the coming months. First of all, as Richard mentioned before, the Southwest is doing quite well at the moment in terms of infection rates, but we don't know what's going to happen in terms of possibility of second waves or lockdowns, and that with the reintroduction of restrictions might have an impact on businesses opportunities in the Southwest. Then second of all, the phasing out of the job retention scheme will determine how many businesses will actually start to struggle even more and how many of these jobs will be turning unemployment. And then the question is, both for businesses and for government, is how best to support workers that are at high risk of being made redundant to transition to new opportunities. And that's not just good for them, it's good for the economy overall. And then thirdly, we knew before COVID-19, there were a number of trends in the labor market that were affecting the way we work. We knew automation and globalization were reshaping the way in which we're working, as well as we know that the skills most in demand were changes, as well as the ways of working. And we know that COVID-19 is very likely to accelerate all these trends. So a question mark in terms of how businesses can adapt to these changes in a time of crisis. I think I'm gonna leave it there for me for now. I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Elena, thank you ever so much. That's really helpful. And, you know, to me feel to be some seed corns of comfort in the data and what's, you know, a very difficult situation more widely, that we have some potential protections around the implications and impact to our economy. So thanks for sharing the data. That's really helpful. And I think with Claire, we'll sort of weave some of that into our forthcoming updates and reports, actually. So thank you very much for sharing that. Right, I would now like to take the opportunity to just share a little bit more of the work that's going on through the West of England Combined Authorities Economic Task Force. As some of you might know, I'm one of the task force members, and I'm the sector lead for our construction, housing and development sector group. And so I just thought and agreed with Tim and Patricia Greer, Chief Exec, that I'd share a little bit of an update. So we've heard from Mayor Bowles in the past of some of the early work. So just to remind people, the government and the Prime Minister asked the Combined Authority mayors to create regional economic task force and recovery plans. We've been working in the region over the last 2 or 3 months with a structure that involves the 4 local authorities, the LEP board members, and a series of other members that have been brought in to ensure that we've got wide representation across the West of England area. The idea is that we're looking at the immediate, short-term, medium and longer-term issues that we need to deal with, and we've been reporting regularly into government around the issues that sit before us, so that we are creating real-time feedback to government around the measures that they might need to support us with in terms of helping with our economy. The idea, however, is that we really look to create a long-term economic recovery plan that draws on our strengths and that drives to a clean and inclusive economy, making sure that we work through the sharp focus of the pandemic to make sure that we're working with the opportunities that exist before us. And also, really importantly, and Zoe talks about this around the work that's going on in Bristol as well, that we make all the right focus towards creating the right level of impact and support for those most disadvantaged communities, which is really, really important. We know we need to be an inclusive and fair economy, but also that we accelerate the reduction in carbon emissions and work towards really helping to drive the right behavioural changes associated with that. There's some key principles. So we want to get residents back to work as quickly as possible, and that includes the support around training and redeployment, that we're focused on a green recovery, so making sure that we've got our carbon objectives for the region thoroughly embedded, strengthening inclusion, as I said, rebuilding business where appropriate, so strengthening our innovation and trade, encouraging startups, supporting startups, and ensuring that we've got the right growth plans for those sectors that need support. And then actually, really importantly, that we are facilitating the renewal of place, so making sure that we've got the right transportation and digital infrastructure, and that we're building the right resilience in, so that we're attractive and supporting places that are hard hit. So there's quite a lot of important principles. As I said, we're doing some phased work, so we've already seen 1 or 2 measures that we've lobbied with, as well as others that are coming back. So it was really clear in our early work, as an example, that we wanted the Help to Buy scheme to be extended to support that particular sector. And I know other people have been lobbying, but that was a recent announcement in terms of the government's response to that. And as we've seen other work that Matt Griffiths and others have led on, we do make a difference working with a whole host of people lobbying to government. The idea, however, is that by the end of October we'll have a comprehensive and cohesive plan. We do absolutely want to influence the recovery as well. It's building off the great work that goes on, that has gone on already around creating a local industrial strategy. It's not to circumvent that, it's to build off it. And our ability to influence is to really be clear on the lobbying and the asks of government, to make sure that we're really clear on how we access the top-down national measures, whether that's Kickstart, bounce back loans, build back better funds, etc., etc. So we're making strong cases. We were also seeing that we're being able to pivot a number of existing funded activities. I'll mention those very briefly. And then actually, how do we create the right interventions now to work within existing funding headroom to sort of target that towards parts of the economy that are really important. And I suppose those who've been following the work of the Combined Authority, there are 3 distinct areas of particular focus. There's a lot of work that's got into business support. So actually, how are we leveraging the West of England Growth Hub? And we've done a lot of work to pivot to deal with the short-term measures. So we have a Trading Better online platform. We have some specific support now for SMEs in terms of financial resilience. We've got some work going to support Thrive West, which is about helping businesses with issues of mental health. We know that actually in the pandemic, it's causing a lot of different challenges for people. We've got a support package, Mentoring for Growth, and we have some support around intellectual property. So clearly really important for many businesses that they secure their rights around intellectual property. The second lens is around skill support. We have an existing program called Future Bright that's been pivoted and tweaked to ensure that we're helping and focusing our support towards those who are either made redundant or at risk of redundancy. Some extra £3.6 million worth of funding has gone in to support that initiative. And for instance, we're working with the aviation industry at the moment in North Bristol around announcements that have been recently made. We've got Workforce of the Future. Zoe, you talked very much about that. There's quite a large fund that's becoming available to support us in our transition to skills support to help us all move forwards with our own needs. We've got our West of England Careers Hub. And then, of course, WECA have the responsibility for the adult education budget, and we're doing work to ensure that we understand the needs of employers so that we can direct that funding in the appropriate way. And then finally, there's a whole strand around supporting business innovation. So we're gearing up to launch a business innovation fund, which will be in the order of £3 to £4 million. Certainly, some of you will be familiar with the recently launched DETI Digital Engineering Technology and Innovation Programme, working with our regional universities, the Superb Asset, which is a national composite centre, the Digital Catapult, and then a number of our major employers, Airbus, GKN, Rolls-Royce and others, which is a fantastic facility for us in the region. And then actually just to really highlight how involved the work of the task force has been, we have detailed engagement with a huge number of sectors: aerospace and advanced engineering, creative and digital technology, professional services, retail, tourism, food and rural, transport and logistics, health and life sciences, housing, construction and development, culture, low carbon, incubators, accelerators and hubs, and digital connectivity, as well as 2 or 3 thematic groups around skills, apprenticeships, training and dealing with the issues of unemployment. So I think actually from the work that I've seen, it's been very wide ranging. I think the combined authority with local authority partners and the LEP have been able to pivot funding and their programs towards supporting the economic recovery. We know there's a huge amount more to do, and if you do feel that you want to be involved and you've not been involved, please do reach out either to the office, the WECA office, or through us at Business West. We're happy to involve you or connect you to the appropriate sector groups. So there we go. That's just a very quick update. So thank you for that. I know we're running a little bit behind the program, but I'm going to open the floor up to any questions and any feedback. So we'll perhaps pick up a point. Sandy, I know you just made a couple of points in there. I don't know if you want to just spell those out at all, actually, but I'll just sort of pick those ones up.
Yeah, happy to.
So, yes, Sandy, thank you.
Well, just to say that I understood that those being potentially made redundant or being made redundant in Filton and Airbus and the aircraft industry are getting that support. I think it's. I guess my concern is that's a very sort of big set of potential redundancies. In the creative industries that we work in, they're likely to be much smaller numbers in sort of individual businesses, but in some ways the similar sorts of numbers in theatres and venues and other places. And I just want to make sure it's something that's been raised with me by the creative industries quite a lot, that we need to make sure that those staff are getting the same support, even though it might be a sort of 2 or 3 individuals being made redundant here or there. Actually, they need the same support as the larger numbers in Airbus or elsewhere.
Thank you. You make a really good point. I know Louise Mitchell's on the line, and you supported that point. Louise, I don't know whether you've been directly involved in any of the work associated with that, and whether perhaps we just need to make sure that, to Sandy's point, we're joining the dots up.
No, I absolutely support what Sandy says, and it may be some larger organisations are due to lose a lot of staff, but the vast majority of the creative industries are very small businesses, and as Sandy said, it'll be 2 or 3 people. And I think for our sector, the real crunch will be the next financial year. From April, there are various support packages available to to cultural organisations to take us through to the beginning of April, but absolutely nothing at the moment from April onwards. And I think that will be the crunch time for a lot of organisations in that sector.
Yeah, no, thanks ever so much for that. I think we'll pick that up. I'll certainly make sure that I sort of feed that back into the economic task force. And I think we'll pick that up as Business West as well, in terms of just thinking about any lobbying we might need to do to support that, Louise.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. I had a question. I'm not sure if Sue's on the line. Sue Turner from the Quartet Community Foundation. So Sue raised a really important question, actually, that as part of the recovery plan, we know that the third sector has got a lot to ask of business. But I think Sue's really making the point that for many of us, and certainly in my own organisation, at Arcadis, we tend to choose a national charity of the year, and we put a lot of our effort behind fundraising to a particular charity. But actually, in these straitened times, what more can we do as business towards actually looking at engaging in our localities? And so you really made the point powerfully around continuing to engage with the local communities in which we're involved. So I think we as both Business West need to help to think about how we can focus and support that. And I think the call, quite rightly from Sue, is actually perhaps those of us who have more of a national focus, how can we make sure that we're pivoting support to local opportunities, local volunteering and fundraising activities. I don't know if anybody wants to come in and make any other further reflections at all in terms of responding to that. What I would say is quite interesting is that for those in local authority procurement, we're seeing a lot more focus now in organisations having to deal with issues of social value, and I think if we can direct those activities really powerfully to connect businesses interactivity with the public sector to create real value from those social value activities, then we can certainly coordinate and coalesce. And I think for those of you who are familiar with the work of the City Office, there's quite a number of good initiatives, as there are across the the 4 authorities in our area, that are linking opportunities for people to share knowledge and experience. So I think we've got quite a number of good opportunities for us to engage. We just need to share some of the detail associated with that, and Victoria and the team, we can do more to perhaps help and support publish those opportunities.
And Richard, if I may just pick up on your point there, just around the volunteering, as I say, I realise, you know, it might not be at the front of businesses' mind at the moment to let staff have volunteering opportunities, but I know that at, you know, governmental level, local authorities, combined authorities, they're well aware of the massive community response to COVID, and obviously they're keen to keep that support in place. But thinking ahead, you know, to employees coming back to the workplace and linking to your point on mental health, you know, people have been, their eyes have been open to the needs of their neighbours and their people around them. So I really think, as well as part of supporting your employees when they come back to work, to enable them to have, even if it's, you know, a couple of days a year, to support their local community, I think that would be a really great thing that you could offer, whilst also making the link between your business and your place even more so.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think the other opportunity we have is that, you know, those of our staff who are on the furlough scheme are able to do some volunteering activity. They're not able to work per se, but they are able to potentially do some volunteering activity. So I think, you know, maybe we can do more in that regard. Liam, you've come in on the chat. I suppose just picking up on that social value piece. I don't know if you want to add any more into the comment that you've made in the chat box, but you're welcome to share your views and thoughts.
It was it just seemed like what you were talking about was is something that we've been trying to pick up through our social value action plan at the Soapworks. So my name's Liam, I'm from First Base. We've got a planning application in for the former Gardner Haskins warehouse on the Soapworks site. And what I think, as a long-term developer, we try and see how we can invest tangibly in the local community. So rather than, I'm not dismissing, you know, sort of charity initiatives, because they're important, and we do that as well. But what we try and, I think, as a way to build trust with the local community, show that we've set out a proper plan that they can feed into, and that can be measured, and that's regularly updated, that shows how we can create local jobs, local training opportunities, how we can work with local groups to improve the local environment or health and well-being. And I think it's not an easy way to help the local community, but it's a tangible way. And I think for if you're investing for the long term, and you're going to be in a certain place for a long time, it's a really worthwhile thing to do. And I'm very happy to share any of our work on that with fellow members.
Yeah, I personally really welcome that, Liam. Thank you very much. And you know, through my sector group, I'd be really happy to look at that as a case study. So perhaps we can connect up afterwards, because we want to encourage more of that. I think we've got John Manley on the line. He's the new High Sheriff for Bristol. And John, if you're able and willing to perhaps just say a few words, and congratulations and welcome into role. I don't know if you have any views, particularly around this issue that we're talking about.
So that's something I've been thinking about a bit for the last couple of months. I've taken very much a systems view of it to look at the city as a whole, and the whole area of asking and giving. And in common with virtually everywhere else, there's a lot of friction in asking and giving. So it's quite difficult to do. It's slow, it's inefficient. And it doesn't touch all the people who are asking, and it doesn't touch all the people who could be giving. So I was just wondering what changes could be made in order to get rid of that friction, and also, in a sense, to democratize asking and giving. Because if you look at the Avon area, I think it's about 4,300 registered charities here. If you then add in all the voluntary and community groups, you're probably getting towards 8,000, 10,000 groups. All of those have things that they need, and most of them don't know how to ask and who to ask for the things that they need. And many of those things are not cash, and they're probably not volunteering hours. They're more like objects, things they want to be given or things they want to be lent, spaces they want to be lent, and also pro bono professional services. So is it possible to work with all those groups to pull out some asks as specific as possible, because the evidence shows that the more specific an ask is, the easier it is to get a match. And then to use the connectivity of the city to look at those asks and say, I think I know a way of doing that. So we've got various proposals, and I'm very happy to send some slide sets out to people who want them, if you just let me know afterwards. At the moment, we're doing an experiment, so we've chosen about 24 small and medium and large size charities from around Bristol, different focus areas, different locations, and we've got people to work with them to pull out some specific asks. Now we're trying to connect those into people who are able to give, and quite often the people who are able to give didn't realize they were able to give because they didn't know that people wanted what they have in terms of time, expertise, and objects. So one very nice example is Ambition Lawrence Weston, which is a great community organisation. They wanted some help and advice in planting flowers and shrubs, perhaps edible things around Lawrence Weston, so to lift the whole environment, and to have things related to climate change, sustainability. So we've connected them up with the University Botanic Gardens, and they're absolutely delighted to go down to Lawrence Weston and start to work with them to think about how the planting around there could be enhanced and give various messages. So hopefully at the end of this experiment, we'll have quite a few of these matches, and as expected, most of these asks are to do with things to be given or lent and pro bono professional help.
Brilliant. So, John, thanks ever so much for that, and certainly that would be really nice to perhaps see a bit more of your thoughts. Sue, I think joined a little bit later, just in the chat. So, Sue, welcome. We were just responding to the question that you posed, but you've just come off a call that perhaps provides a little bit of further insight. I don't know if there's any final reflections that you might want to just make.
Yeah, Quartet's been experimenting for a couple of years now with different ways of helping businesses get value from these partnerships, and what we've come across a number of times is that the charitable organisations really aren't great at specifying what their needs are, because they don't necessarily know what they really need. And John's point is absolutely right. It's about spending more time teasing out those real needs that are quite often hidden. So the new person that I just put in the chat that we've literally just offered the job to 10 minutes ago, hope will be joining us for the city funds in a matter of days or weeks, and that person will be spending a lot of time working with charitable organisations, really getting underneath the skin of what they need. And then we're not trying to set up something in competition to what already exists. We want to collaborate with you guys, collaborate with business in the community and Cranfield Trust and Bristol Law Society, just helping oil the wheels where, as John put it, there's some stickiness in the system at the moment. So it'd be a really interesting collaboration. The money's coming from some money we've got from government, some money from Bosca, from Quartet, and from a private philanthropist. So it really shows the value of that collaboration all coming together.
So thank you very much. Well, I think we'd perhaps pick that up as as an ongoing theme, really important for all of us, but really important for our community. So thank you very much for that. I just wonder, we've got Richard Harris from City of Bristol College on the call. Richard, I don't know if you mind me tapping it, but I'd just be interested to sort of your reflections on the mood of our younger community, where you sort of see students coming back to college, any challenges, issues, and perhaps how the college are supporting the task force around linking the skills that we need to the future jobs. Richard, I wonder if you've perhaps got a few thoughts that you might share.
Yes, absolutely, Richard. Yeah, happy to do so. And I think just reflecting back on the presentation from Zoe, and it strikes me that it's really good now to see the whole skills agenda at the centre of the government's thinking on the recovery, because undoubtedly that is something which will be a huge part in getting the economy back on its feet. I think businesses have long understood that importance. I think WECA, to be fair to WECA, they understand the importance. And now I think central government have put us very firmly in the middle of this recovery path. I think what colleges do need to do better, and this includes City of Bristol, is make sure that we are absolutely connected and integrated into the needs of the local businesses. So rather than the college saying, this is our offer, we do the following courses, it's, well, what careers do you as businesses and local organisations, what do you want to build for your future workforce, and we will be the supplier. So it's slightly changing the dynamics of the college and business relationship, but we absolutely want to be a part of that. And Andy, my boss as principal and chief exec, is part of the recovery task force.
Yeah.
And that is a real focus for City of Bristol College and for our subsidiary organisations. We really absolutely need to be part of the city's recovery and joined at the hip with businesses in that skills workforce planning.
Brilliant. No, Richard, you make a really important point, and I know that's certainly at the top of our agenda. And just from my own experience of the work I've been doing in the task force, we've got a huge amount of pressure to build, very green housing, and actually I hadn't appreciated this, but to build, generally one of the approaches is to use heat pumps and heat recovery systems and various other bits and pieces. And actually, we have very few people who are qualified in fitting that sort of equipment. So on one level, we want to push forwards a green house building agenda, and on the other, there's a potential failure point just in terms of the number of people who are able to fit some of the systems. So absolutely joining those dots up is going to be really important. So there'll be some further recommendations in that regard. Super. Is there anybody who wants to raise a hand? I had a question actually from Similius from the BDM Bristol Credit Union, and he was just asking the question around what financial support can be given, what support can be given to financial well-being in the workplace. It's an important means of reducing stress and allowing people to focus on their jobs, and what more can be done to sort of create and promote financial welfare in the workplace. And it's a really good question, and I suppose, Sim, I think you're on the line. I don't know if you want to build any further thoughts on that very briefly in particular.
Hi, good morning. Excuse me, we're into the afternoon now. For those that don't know me, I'm Sim Ilias. I do business development work for Bristol Credit Union. Specifically, what I look after for the credit union is a financial welfare at work initiative. The basic principle behind that is to ensure that people feel like outside of work, their financial situation is looked after and managed the best it possibly can be, and therefore the prospect of them being present and correct in work and delivering to their full potential is massively improved. It doesn't therefore have a big impact on productivity, workplace relationships, and all those different kinds of things. We, of course, I'll declare my interests here. We, of course, offer an initiative, a partnership initiative, which is free to any business which is operating in Bristol, Bath and the surrounding area. It's really easy to implement. And it makes a massive difference to our existing partners, the likes of Bristol City Council, Airbus, Baines Council, and employers large and small. And I just was interested in the appetite for this kind of thing across this group, but also the prevalence of any other initiatives which are doing similar things in the region.
Brilliant. So, Sim, thank you very much. And actually, there are probably two strands, just thinking about, at the very least, the work that is going on through the Combined Authority. The financial resilience support to businesses probably offers an opportunity for us to make sure that those sorts of issues are being connected in. And of course, the work of Thrive West around the wellbeing and mental health support for staff, knowing that for many, the financial pressures create a lot of wellbeing related issues. So we'll sort of look at how those two initiatives particularly deal with that issue. So thank you very much for that. I know I'm just conscious of time. I did reach out to Toby. I don't know if Toby, you're on the line, Toby Savage, still, and whether you might just share any further reflections from the work that's going on in South Gloucestershire. I know you've just been really clear that we must be careful around how we publicise the current health incidence rates in the community. Toby, is there anything you might want to add in? Thank you for joining us.
Richard, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. No, it's always a test when people have turned off their camera and their microphone as to whether they're actually there or not, or
yeah, well, there you go. Well done.
or have just wandered off. So Richard, sorry, just to be clear, your just question was just around the sort of the COVID prevalence at the moment.
Yeah, that, and also is there anything from South Gloucester that you want to just share? Really, obviously, you know, we've been perhaps talking a little bit more about the region or Bristol, but is there anything that you're doing that you want to just share with colleagues? And obviously, the point you've just been making recently on social media about being very careful around how we deal with the public health statistics as well.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I'll just talk about sort of what I've been up to sort of most recently, because I think by and large, having listened to the discussion, I just want to sort of focus on sort of making some new points.
Thank you.
I had a meeting earlier in the week just around that, and it's linked with skills, and it is around the capacity that we've got within our education system. You know, whether that's higher education, further education particularly, but also you know, post 16, you know, to make sure that we are scaling up to the level that is going to be required, particularly to deal with you know, the large numbers of people who are sadly going to be losing their jobs over the next few months, and to ensure that period of unemployment is as brief as possible, and that we are immediately offering opportunities for reskilling, so that they are not permanently lost, you know, to the workplace, because we know how damaging that can be, even for a short period of time. You know, particularly around confidence and that whole mental health piece, which again you've talked about earlier. So that's a key concern of mine. And I think it's also just around, and you made reference to it, I think just the reporting of all this. And I have been very disappointed with the alarmist coverage that has appeared in various of our local media outlets over recent days and weeks, around how certain data streams are being interpreted in isolation of other data streams, because I think what this has told us over the last few months is just how complicated this is, and actually and that need to ensure that you're looking at the situation in the round rather than just overly focusing around sort of one or two particular numbers. But I think it was also just to finally just say just to thank you all for sort of all the work that you've been doing, and particularly, you know, participating on calls like this today. You know, this is how I and other leaders and you know, other officials within the local councils, you know, can build up and really appreciate what's going on within our local businesses, and to, you know, to keep up that information flow, because that's how we're able to refine our regional approach, and to make sure that we are really sort of, you know, hitting all the right notes in how we sort of come back stronger than ever.
Excellent. Toby, thank you very much for sharing that, and I'm conscious that we've just taken people over time, so thank you. I'm going to draw the more formal part of this session to a close. I would just like to say that this week should have been the balloon fiesta. I see Don Cameron's on the line, and it was very heartening to see the balloons flying earlier on in the week. That was really nice to see. Tomorrow morning we are, however, hosting our business breakfast online in partnership with a number of organisations. You're very welcome to join us. Victoria can send out details for those who would like that. In fact, she just posted that. So those who are joining us tomorrow, thank you. For those who would like to stay on for the chat, we're around for half an hour for more informal networking. And can I just say a huge thank you to Claire, to Elena, and to Zoe in particular for sharing your thoughts and insights. That sparked some really good debates, and thank you for participating. We really appreciate that. Right, so for those who need to drop off, please feel free, that's fine. And for those who want to hang around for a little bit of networking and more informal chat, we'll be here for another 30 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.